Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special English lesson. Today, we will learn about a place that is very big, very cold, and very interesting. This place is called Alaska. Alaska is part of the United States now, but in the past, it was different. Alaska has a long and interesting history. Many different people lived there. You will learn about the first people in Alaska, the time when Russia owned Alaska, and how the United States bought it. This video will help you practice listening and learn new English words. Now let's get started. Part 1. The First People and the Russian Arrival. A very, very long time ago, Alaska was not empty. Many different groups of people lived there. These were the native peoples of Alaska. They were the first to live in this big, beautiful, and cold land. These people were very smart and strong. They learned to live with the cold weather, the snow, and the ice. They built homes from wood, from stone, and sometimes from ice. They hunted animals like caribou, moose, or seals. They fished for salmon and other fish in the rivers and the sea. They used everything from the animals to live, the meat for food, the skin for clothes, and the bones for tools. There were many different groups. Some were the Aleut people, the Yupik people, the Inuit people, and the Tlingit people. Each group had its own language, its own culture, and its own traditions. They lived in Alaska for thousands of years. They were the true first people of the land. Then, a new group of people came. These people came from across the sea, from a very far-away country called Russia. The Russians were looking for new lands and new things to trade. The year was 1741. A Russian explorer named Vitus Bering came to Alaska. He was the first European person to see this land. He and his crew were surprised by the land. It was very big, with tall mountains, and a lot of wild animals. They saw many sea otters. The sea otter had very beautiful and warm fur. The Russians thought, "This is a great place to get rich." The fur of the sea otters was very expensive. People in Europe and China wanted this fur. So the Russians started to come to Alaska. More and more Russian traders and hunters came to Alaska. They were looking for the sea otters. They were not nice to the native peoples. They forced the native peoples to hunt for them. They took the fur and gave little in return. The native peoples suffered a lot during this time. Many of them died from new sicknesses that the Russians brought. Many also died from fighting the Russians. The Russians built small towns and forts. The first Russian settlement was on an island. Later, they built a small capital city called New Archangel. Today, this city is called Sitka. The Russians controlled a part of Alaska for more than 100 years. This time is known as the period of Russian America. So, in the first part of our story, we learned that Alaska was home to many native peoples for a very long time. Then, in the 1700s, the Russians came. They came for the valuable fur of the sea otters. This started the time of Russian America. Part 2. Russian America, Fur Trade, and Life for Native People. In this part of our story, we will talk more about the time when Russia controlled Alaska. This period, from the mid-1700s to 1867, was a very important time for Alaska. It was a time of trading, but also a time of struggle. The main reason the Russians were in Alaska was for the fur trade. The sea otter fur was the most important. The Russians wanted to get as much fur as possible. They created a big company called the Russian American Company. This company was in charge of all the trading and all the lands in Alaska. The company was like a government for Russian America. The Russian American Company was led by a man named Alexander Baranov. He was a very strong leader. He made the company very successful. He built many trading posts in small towns. Sitka, which was called New Archangel, became the main city. It had a big fort, a church, and many buildings. It was a small piece of Russia in North America. But life in Russian America was not good for everyone. The native peoples were forced to work for the Russians. The Aleut people, in particular, were forced to hunt in the cold sea for the sea otters. Many of them were hurt or died. Their population went down a lot. The Russians also brought new ways of life. They brought the Russian Orthodox religion. Many native peoples became Orthodox Christians. The Russians also brought new tools and new foods. But these new things did not make up for this bad treatment and the new sicknesses that the native peoples faced. After a while, the number of sea otters started to go down. There were not as many as before. The Russians had hunted too many. This was a big problem for the Russian American Company. They were making less money. The Russian government also started to have problems. They were fighting wars in other parts of the world. The company in Alaska was very far away. It was difficult and expensive to send supplies and people to Alaska. It was also difficult to protect Alaska. So, the time of Russian America was a time of big business with fur. It was good for the Russian American Company for a while, but it was very hard for the native peoples, and it was also becoming a problem for the Russian government. They were making less money, and it was too difficult to control a land so far away. This leads us to the next part of our story, where we will learn why Russia decided to sell this big land. Part 3. Why Russia sold Alaska. Now, we come to a very important question. Why did Russia sell Alaska to the United States? This was a very big decision. It was not easy for Russia to sell such a big piece of land. But there were several very good reasons. The first reason was money. The Russian government was in a lot of debt. Debt means they owed a lot of money to other countries. Russia had just finished a big war called the Crimean War. This war was very expensive. The Russian government needed money to pay its debts and to help its economy. They saw Alaska as a place that was not making them much money anymore. The sea otter fur trade was not as profitable as it used to be. They had hunted too many sea otters. The Russian-American company was not doing well. Selling Alaska seemed like a good way to get a lot of money quickly. The second reason was the fear of losing Alaska to Great Britain. At that time, Russia and Great Britain were not friends. They were rivals. Great Britain was a very powerful country. It had a very strong navy. Great Britain also had a colony very close to Alaska. This was Canada. The Russians were afraid that if a war started with Great Britain, the British Army from Canada would easily march into Alaska and take it. It would be very difficult for Russia to protect Alaska because it was so far away. They would have to send ships and soldiers all the way across the sea. The British were right next door. Russia thought it was better to sell Alaska to a friendly country, the United States, than to lose it for free to an enemy, Great Britain. The third reason was the difficulty of control. Alaska was very, very far away from the capital of Russia, St. Petersburg. It took many months to send a letter from Russia to Alaska. It was almost impossible to send soldiers and supplies quickly. It was too big and too far to manage. The Russian government felt that they could not properly control this land. They did not have enough people to live there. The population of Russians in Alaska was very small, only a few hundred people. It was an empty land, far away, and very hard to protect. So, to summarize, Russia sold Alaska for three main reasons. 1. They needed a lot of money to pay their debts after a big war. 2. They were afraid that Great Britain would take Alaska for free if a war started. 3. It was too difficult and too expensive to control and protect a land that was so far away. For Russia, selling Alaska was a difficult but smart decision. They chose to sell it to the United States. Now, let's learn why the United States wanted to buy it. Part 4. Why America bought Alaska. The decision to buy Alaska was also a very big decision for the United States. Many people in the U.S. did not want to buy it. They called it Seward's Folly or Seward's Icebox. Folly means a foolish action. They thought it was a useless land of ice and snow. But the Secretary of State, a man named William Seward, had a different idea. He was the man who made the deal with Russia. He believed that buying Alaska was a very good idea for America. He had three main reasons. The first reason was the idea of manifest destiny. This was a big idea in America at that time. It was the belief that the United States should own all the land in North America, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, and even more. Americans wanted to expand and have a big country. Buying Alaska would make America much bigger and would fulfill this idea of manifest destiny. The second reason was the valuable resources. William Seward believed that Alaska had many things that America could use. He knew that Alaska had a lot of fish, a lot of lumber, wood from trees, and a lot of animals for fur. He also believed that there could be other resources that people did not know about yet. He was right. Later, people found gold and oil in Alaska. So, the land was not useless at all. It was full of valuable things that would make America rich. The third reason was the strategic position. Strategic means a good position for military or political reasons. Alaska was very close to Asia. If America owned Alaska, it would be a good place for ships and for trade with countries like Japan and China. It would also be a good place for the American Army and Navy. It would help America become a more powerful country in the world. So, the United States decided to buy Alaska. The deal was made on March 30th, 1867. The United States bought Alaska from Russia for $7.2 million. In today's money, this is not very much for such a big piece of land. It was about 2 cents per acre. Acre is a unit for land size. It was a very good price for America. The treaty was signed in Washington, D.C. The flag of Russia was taken down in Sitka, Alaska, and the flag of the United States was put up. Alaska officially became a part of the United States. People still called it Seward's Folly for a long time. But in the next part of our story, we will see that it was not a foolish idea at all. Part 5. The Discovery of Gold and the Growth of Alaska. After the United States bought Alaska, many people did not care about it. They still thought it was just a big icebox. The U.S. government did not pay much attention to Alaska for a long time. It was not a state or even a territory. It was just a big empty land that the Army and Navy watched over. There were very few Americans living there, but this all changed in the year 1896. A very important thing happened. Gold was discovered. Gold was found in the Yukon region, which is right next to Alaska in Canada. Many people came to the area. This was the start of the Klondike Gold Rush. Gold rush means when many people go to a place to find gold. The easiest way to get to the Klondike was to go through Alaska. So many people came to Alaska, especially to the town of Skagway. They traveled through Alaska on their way to the gold fields. This made Alaska's towns grow. People started to see that Alaska was not just an empty land. It was a place with opportunities. Then, more gold was found in Alaska itself, in a place called Nome, and later in Fairbanks. This brought even more people to Alaska. People who were looking for gold, people who opened stores, people who built new towns. The population of Alaska grew very fast. The gold rush changed everything for Alaska. The U.S. government started to pay more attention. They saw that Alaska was a valuable land. They realized that it needed a government and laws. The nickname Seward's Folly started to fade away. People began to see that William Seward had been very smart to buy the land. In 1912, the U.S. government made Alaska a territory. Territory is a part of a country that does not have the same power as a state. It had its own government, but it was still controlled by the U.S. government in Washington, D.C. This was a big step for Alaska. It was no longer just a neglected piece of land. It was a real part of America. The discovery of gold was the most important thing that happened in the early American history of Alaska. It brought people, it brought business, and it showed the true value of the land. It set the stage for Alaska to become even more important in the future. Part 6. Alaska becomes a state and its modern role. After the gold rush, Alaska continued to grow slowly. It was a very big place, but still with a small population. Then, in the 20th century, two big events made Alaska even more important. The first big event was World War II. The war was from 1939 to 1945. During this war, Japan, an enemy of the United States, attacked some islands in Alaska. The U.S. government realized that Alaska was in a very important strategic location. It was a defense point for America. The U.S. sent many soldiers to Alaska. They built many new military bases. They also built a new road from the United States to Alaska. This road was called the Alaska Highway. This brought even more people and more investment to Alaska. The war made Alaska a very important place for the defense of the United States. After the war, many people wanted Alaska to become a full state. They believed that Alaska should have the same rights as other states. They wanted to have their own power to make decisions. The people of Alaska worked very hard to convince the U.S. government. Finally, their dream came true. On January 3, 1959, Alaska officially became the 49th state of the United States. It was a day of celebration for all the people in Alaska. They were no longer a territory. They were a full state with their own power and their own voice in the country. The second big event happened in the late 1960s. People discovered a lot of oil in Alaska. They found a huge amount of oil in a place called Prudhoe Bay in the far north of Alaska. This was a very important discovery. Oil is a very valuable resource. It made Alaska very rich. The government of Alaska used the money from the oil to help the people. They built a long pipeline, called the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, to take the oil from the north to the south of the state. Today, Alaska is known for its beautiful nature, its cold weather, its big mountains, and its rich resources. It is a very important part of the United States. Its history, from the first native peoples to the Russian traders, to the American purchase, to the gold rush, and finally to statehood and oil, is a story of big changes and great importance. The decision to buy the icebox for just $7.2 million turned out to be one of the best deals in American history. That's the end of our lesson for today. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a like and share it with your friends. You can also leave a fun fact about Alaska in the comments. Let's keep learning together. Thanks for watching.